Joining us now, retired California Superior Court Judge LaDoris Cordell, New York Law School professor Rebecca Roiphe, and former RNC Communications Director Doug Heye. Everybody, thanks for being here. Judge, I want to begin with you and ask about this lawsuit in California. The Ninth Circuit and the appeal by Donald Trump to push back to say we can continue with these raids, we can continue with this profiling as they're doing. What's the likely outcome?
Katie, thank you for even dealing with this issue. But let me just first back up just for a second. At this hearing, the plaintiffs, the defendants, that is the Department of Homeland Security, asked the judge to provide a $30 million bond. And that was to pay for training the agents to comply with the court's order. So just think about it. In addition to being a Superior Court judge, I was also an independent police auditor for the 10th largest city in the United States, and that's San Jose, California. And the one thing that is clear, all law enforcement, be it local, state, federal, they have to go through training. And part of the training is to learn about the Fourth Amendment, the Bill of Rights, but specifically the Fourth Amendment that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. So these lawyers went into court saying that the Homeland Security ICE officers want $30 million bond, so pay them so they can train them to abide by the Fourth Amendment, which is automatically given in their training. Totally bizarre and also ridiculous. And the judge, of course, denied it and said, you're supposed to have this training, so why would you have people pay to give you training about the Fourth Amendment? So to get back to your question, a judge can only issue a restraining order if the judge believes that the outcome is likely to be one that supports the plaintiff's position. And so the judge, after listening and to all of the arguments, made a decision that said the plaintiffs were likely to succeed in proving that the government was conducting roving patrols without reasonable suspicion and denying access to lawyers. So there is a likely outcome, in my view, that this judge's ruling will be upheld. It's very simple. This is kind of, police enforcement 101.
What does it say to you, Judge, that they were asking for this bond, that they went in there saying, we need this money to help train folks? You just heard Tom Homan there a moment ago saying that profiling alone is not enough, in his view, to detain someone.
This isn't the first time that Homeland Security has made this argument. They made it before another judge after a raid in Kern County saying, can you give us money so we can train people to abide by the Constitution? And when I say people, I mean law enforcement. It is ridiculous. And it's the only argument they have. They don't have anything else to rely on. They are doing racial profiling, plain and simple. Both judges have said you cannot stop people for race or ethnicity or because they speak Spanish or they speak English with an accent or they're at a bus stop or a car wash or a tow yard or a day laborer. You cannot do this. And in 2 words, that's racial profiling. They have nothing else because that's what they've been doing. So their next argument is, well, I guess we ought to learn how to abide by the Constitution. Ridiculous, and it's because they have nothing else.
Rebecca, weigh in on this.
Well, I think there's a legal question and there's a factual question that we're waiting to hear the results of. The legal question is absolutely right. Race alone cannot be the sole consideration in order to stop somebody, but it can be one factor among many. So we need to wait and see, does the government have something else that they're doing, something beyond just the race of this person or the language they're speaking or where they are? That is inappropriate, but maybe they can come up with something else. And then there's this legal question of, what more do you need? And you don't, this is actually somewhat unsettled. How much more but beyond somebody's race does one need in order to just stop and question them before you arrest them? And so what the government is going on, what legal arguments they're going to put forward, we have to wait to see.
Immigration is such an interesting, and I mean that, an interesting subject right now because the American public has been swaying back and forth on it. And it was a large part to do with Donald Trump's election. And yet you have so many people, despite being at the RNC and seeing the mass deportation now signs, you have so many people saying this is not what they expected. Are you surprised by those poll numbers that we mentioned at the top of the show?
No, I'm not. And what we've seen is, Donald Trump has campaigned well on immigration. It's been terra firma for him. Republicans usually feel that they have an advantage on immigration. But he's caught in a challenge of his own success here because we don't have the situation at the border as a daily occurrence that we're all seeing footage of people coming over, because that problem has been solved, we're looking at different areas where he's not on that firm ground that he's used to being. And so when we hear these tragic stories of people who have died or been wrongfully detained, images that we see, it's obviously not a political winner for the White House.
I'm just surprised that they're not being a little bit more surgical about this, because when you look at what they're claiming versus what they're doing, there is a wide gulf. They're saying they're going after the murderers and the criminals, and that's who they're arresting and they're detaining. But, you know, NBC News has been able to get into some of these numbers, and they claim in a White House video 70% of those arrested under Trump's ICE had criminal convictions and pending charges. They claim they're murderers, rapists, and child predators. Just 0.4% of them, according to internal ICE documents reviewed by NBC News, were convicted of murder. Just 1.8% convicted or facing pending sexual assault charges. 56% had criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. 42% have no criminal history at all in the United States. So the numbers don't quite line up, Doug. And people there's the numbers, obviously, but they're experiencing it as well. They're seeing the raids happening in their towns. They're seeing the raids happening at places that they frequent, businesses, agriculture, restaurants, hospitality. They're seeing their, employees of theirs, heard reports of nannies being too afraid to leave the house in Los Angeles. So they're feeling it in a way that also just goes against what Donald Trump is claiming.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump doesn't do surgery. He does blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this is how he engages in his business affairs, all of his political affairs. And so what you'll see from the White House is they'll name individuals that they've arrested to say, well, do you want this murderer here? Do you want this rapist to stay in the United States? With the obvious answer of being no. That's how they get politically back on the firm ground where they're comfortable.
Are you concerned about the lawsuits, or does that help Donald Trump?
I think as long as he is, in his mind, as long as he is fighting on the issue of immigration, he feels that he's in a good place. As long as he can blame activist judges and so forth, that's where he wants to be. It's part of how he has designed this system to be. It's me and you against the system.
What about the masking of ICE agents? You have the AG in California who's trying to pass a law that will require ICE agents to demask.
Yeah, I mean, this is a live legal issue, and I think that there's, some good arguments that it is, problematic to have them masked like that, and I think also problematic from a political perspective, but also from a legal perspective. And so, we'll see whether that law passes and whether it would be upheld.
Judge, what about the complaints from deportees inside deportation facilities right now? We have some NBC News exclusive reporting that immigrants in overcapacity ICE detention say they're hungry. They're raising food quality concerns. These are detention centers in at least 7 states that are complaining of this. Hunger, again, food shortages, spoiled food. 60,000 people, almost 45% above the capacity provided for by Congress, currently being detained by ICE. Is there grounds for legal action among the detainees there?
I'm glad you raised this issue, because the judge in the California case brought this issue up specifically. And she wrote that, first of all of these people who are detained have a right to have access to lawyers, which they're not getting. And then she went on to describe just one holding area that for immigrants, people who had been detained. And she wrote, and I'm quoting, the facility cannot provide detainees with basic hygiene. Individuals who are menstruating have had to wait long periods before receiving menstrual pads, if they receive them at all. So it's an issue that definitely, it's a legal issue. And I'm glad that the judge has addressed it. And it raises the question, do we want people to be maintained in a gulag? Because that is not America. And what's interesting, this judge, born and raised in Los Angeles, both of her parents are immigrants from Ghana. And I'm delighted the case was before her. We need to have judges who absolutely grasp and understand the seriousness of this.